What's up, Wargamers? Welcome back to World of Wargaming. And today I invite you for the 40-somethingth time to grab a chair, a beverage, and a snack. And let me talk at you for a minute. Today we have a game that was sent to me by the author, Demigod. So Demigod is a game that it can be played solo or adversarially, head-to-head, and it is set in the days of Greek mythology. So if you're a person who has played Ancients, you might already have models for this. If not, it's a skirmish game, so you only need to invest in around 5 to 8 models or so. And in this game, you have a band of adventurers and you are bandying around the Greek countryside in pursuit of glory and to forge the legend of yourself by vanquishing some of the most well-known monsters from Greek mythology. And when Christian explained that that was the focus of the game, he had me, because I, and probably many of you, as a child, Greek mythology was kind of the first thing that really set my brain on fire for the genre of fantasy. It was my true gateway. And then later on, I read, the works of Tolkien, The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, The Silmarillion, all that stuff. And then that catapulted me forward into the idea of like epic fantasy series, which from then I discovered, The Wheel of Time, which stands today as my all-time favorite books, L.E. Modesitt Jr., all those great epic fantasy writers. But Greek mythology is kind of what first in my very, very, very young youth set that part of my brain ablaze. So as soon as Christian told me that, like he pretty much had me. We come into the intro for the book, and there is a discrepancy here, and I think that it is a misprint in one of the two spots. I think it's a misprint here, and that is that it says that it's a 2x2 table, whereas the scenarios tell you a 3x3. Now, I could be wrong there, but I think that might be a misprint. But in addition to, we're going to say 3x3 because that's what the scenarios tell me. You need your models, you need a tape measure in inches, the game uses D6s, and you need a pencil to keep up with stuff on your hero sheet. And then the book opens up with the creation of your major hero, minor hero, and minions, which are the 3 stages. Not going to go into the character and party creation process here. As always, we will take a look at that in a separate video. But I will say that it seems pretty straightforward. Your minimum party, including that major hero, is 3. Your maximum is 7. I will, however, stop in on the list of weapons, as it is a very short list and gives you a good definition of what they all do. So you got an axe, a bow, a dagger, a gastrophetes or fetes. I'm not exactly sure how to say it. I'm going to say gastrophetes because normally with those languages, you just kind of pronounce it the way that it's written. Anyways, it's kind of a precursor to the crossbow. I didn't know what it was, and I would not know what it was had the book not told me. I would have had to go Google that for myself. A javelin, a sling, a shield, a spear, and a sword. Those are your options. And then they tell you what they do very, very clearly in very concise language, which I am always a fan of. And I like that there's not a giant list of equipment. We are still talking about, Bronze Age civilizations, so it's good that it's, pretty straightforward to what they probably would have had. I like that. Which puts us into chapter 3, which is broken up oddly. So it's the chapter is questing, which is going to cover most of the rules of the game. There is a standard basic go-to scenario that is here, and then there are more scenarios that are specific to certain myths or monsters that are later on in the book. But in your basic scenario, this is your setup. You have a 3x3, and this is where it says all quests should be played on a 3x3, is right here in this page right here. So that's where I think we get that misprint from. But we have our major monster, and then minor monsters that surround it. And then our deployment edges are one of those. But in the very, very middle, you have the major, and then equally spaced around it, we have the minors. You're then left with a bunch of 9x9 squares, and it says to put a piece of terrain in each of those 9x9 squares, or one piece terrain in one piece in each 9x9 in each quarter of the board. Once terrain has been placed, we set up our monsters, and then you go to town. Then we come into our rules for actually playing the game. Once all the terrain and monsters are placed, we place loot tokens. So loot tokens are determined by adding up all of the monsters and then dividing that number in half, adding 4, and rounding down, which is a lot of steps, but none of them are difficult steps. Then each player takes half, and you place them anywhere on the board that is at least 6 inches from a table edge and 9 inches away from another loot token. And then you roll off to choose sides, and everybody places their models within 9 inches of the table edge that they chose. Now, as we get into the rules, I would like to mention here that by Christian's own admission, this game is kind of a love letter to the games of Joseph McCullough, i.e. Frostgrave and Rangers predominantly. Heavily inspired, and we're going to see quite a bit of that influence as we go through the rule sections, but there are some choices that he made that are very different than any of the choices that I've seen in Joe's games. And I think that's very interesting. I think that's going to lead to some fun aspects of gameplay. The most notable of which is the dice. We are using 3d6 for our rolls. We then add different things, different modifiers, depending on the situation. And the first use of that 3d6 system is in the initiative roll, where you're going to roll. Now, this is, of course, for head-to-head. You roll, add your major hero's resolve, which is one of their stats, and then whoever is the highest is the primary player for all 3 phases of that turn. Ties must be re-rolled. Those 3 phases being the hero, minion, and monster phases. In the hero phase, the primary player will activate their major hero first. Same for the secondary. You have to activate that major first. The timing is written specifically that way, and I think that leans a bit more towards Frostgrave than it does Rangers. I've not played Frostgrave, but I've played a lot of Joe's other games, so that may be how that works. Or this may be unique. This may be a new thing. After the major heroes have been activated, beginning with the primary player, you alternate activating your minor heroes until all of those have been exhausted. The minion phase works the exact same way, except it's your minions and non-hero models, beginning with the primary player, moving to the secondary, and then alternating until all of those models have been exhausted. And to conclude the turn, you have the monster phase, where you will always begin with the major monster and then minor monsters, and they will activate according to the specifics of their rules. So it would seem that each monster, there's a basic AI, and then each monster, I think, also has some specific rules that can modify that AI. We then come into the activations, like what can I do when I activate my major, minor, and minions? So when you activate a model, you get 2 actions. One of which has to be move, unless you have a special rule somewhere that says you can do something instead of your normal move action. So your normal move action is what I want to say there. Your second action could be a second move, to fight, to shoot, to call on a boon, to pick up loot, or to command another model. And it is important to note that you can do those things in any order. Shoot, then move, then shoot. Whatever you want to do, or whatever is going to be best, considering modifiers to give you the best roll possible. It then touches on the command action, commanding another model. This is akin to group activations in, I would say, probably closer to Frostgrave, because I've had a lot of conversations with people on the internet because of the way that the rules of Rangers changed after the first edition, and they weren't as strict. But here, any of your heroes can choose to activate or command and activate a minion that is within 3 inches of them when they activate. Not after they move, but prior to any movement when they activate. Any of those minions that are within 3 inches, they can activate and make all of its actions. And then the hero, if it has more actions, can choose to use them accordingly. One wonderful point of difference that I would like to make here is with the movement action. Your second movement in this game can still be up to your full movement value. There's no cutting it in half for a second movement. You can get your full movement 2 times, which is awesome because that 12 inches of movement most of the time can really help you cover ground and get where you need to be in a timely fashion. And it is worth noting that there has to be an inch of space around an object for you to move between it. You can move through your other major and minor heroes, but minions will block your movement, friendly or foe. With movement, of course, we have obstructed and rough terrain, and they work pretty much the same. It's 2 inches of movement for every inch that you move. So that's going to cover swimming, swimming, climbing something, just moving through a play area that's scattered with debris and ruins or whatnot. 2 inches for every inch. You can also move into combat, which is to use your movement. If you end your movement in base to base, this game is strictly base to base, you are in combat and you immediately begin the combat sequence. You may not make a move action until you've completed the combat sequence at least once. So it is possible to move away from combat in this game. That's another departure that's different than the inspiration, and I like that. I think that's an improvement. I've never been a fan of being locked and tar-pitted into a combat. I like to be able to move away, but at the same time, it can create very cinematic and fun moments with the selection of certain special abilities. But I like here that I'm not stuck in combat until I've fought at least one time. We then have forcing combat, which is the same, which is if you come within an inch of an enemy model, or an enemy model comes within an inch of you, you can choose to move into base to base and force a combat with them. Enemies, monsters will always force combat usually. If it's another player or yourself, you obviously have that choice. If you have a piece of loot or an objective of some sort, you are welcome to move off the edge of the board with it. They don't count as dead, they've just left. However, you cannot be forced off of the board involuntarily. Jumping is a thing and can be a part of your movement. However, you can jump up to 3 inches, and for every inch that you jump in a straight line, you have to have moved that far in a straight line towards the edge of the jump. Otherwise, you can jump over a gap up to an inch at no penalty or anything to your movement. And with all that jumping and being nimbly-bimbly, bouncing through the trees and whatnot, there's always the chance that you could fall. So a fall of up to 3 inches is no harm, no foul. You get up, rub some dirt on it, and keep it moving. However, for a fall that is more than 3 inches, you suffer 1 damage for every inch beyond 3. So if you fell 5 inches, you would take 2 damage. So we then come to the combat mechanics, which are very similar, except of course with the use of the 3d6. So you both roll 3d6. If you're the attacker, you add your combat. If you are the defender, you add your armor. If whoever is higher is the winner. If the attacker is the winner, he does damage. There is no strike back. So if the defender wins, they just don't take damage. And it has to be better. There's not equal or better. The attacker score has to be higher. Anything else would be considered a win for the defender. To determine damage, you subtract defender score from attacker score, plus or minus any damage modifiers, and that's the amount of damage that is dealt. Once damage and all that stuff has been sorted out, if the attacker won, they can either choose to stay in combat or push the defender back 1 inch. If the defender wins, they must roll 3d6 and beat... Wait. The attacker, sorry. If the defender wins, the attacker must roll 3d6 and beat the defender's resolve score. So it would be 10 plus resolve bonus, or be pushed back 1 inch themselves. If combat was a tie, neither model is moved and they remain in combat. When you're up in the scrum and looking for a scrap, if you brought more boys to the party than they did, you get a bonus. So you get +1 to the combat roll for every friendly model that is not engaging a enemy model. So sometimes it pays to fight dirty. A model will become wounded once it has 4 health or less remaining. While wounded, it's halved down to 1 action. However, that action does not have to be movement. It can be any action that you choose. However, any rolls that you make are at -2. If you manage to heal yourself up above 4, you're no longer wounded. You can go about your business as usual. Now, every once in a while you're fighting, you might do a critical hit. Critical hits in this game, I think I like and dislike this because I think that they're not going to happen very often considering my dice. However, that also means that on the rare occasion that they do happen, they're going to be much more exciting. So I like and dislike that. But a crit in this game is when you roll a natural 18 on your dice. So that's 3 6s on 3d6. When you do that, it's an automatic hit. It deals an extra 5 damage and it ignores any negative modifiers. So pretty strong when it hits, but getting it to hit, I think, is going to be difficult or rare. Maybe not difficult because it's not hard to roll dice. It's just random. So, yeah. We then come to ranged combat, which works for the most part the same as melee combat. You are obviously check for range and line of sight for the weapon. Roll your 3d6. Shooter adds their shoot stat or combat stat, and target adds their speed stat. If the shooter has the higher score, they hit. Damage, however, is where it differs from melee. With range damage, you calculate up by adding your damage modifiers. You subtract the target's armor in this situation. Not their roll, but their armor. And then whatever the remainder is, if it's positive, is the amount of damage that is dealt. You are allowed to shoot into combat. And as far as I can see, there's not a modifier for it. However, there is a straight 50-50 shot that you hit one of your buddies. So when you shoot into an engagement, you roll a d6 on a 1 to 3. You hit one of your friends. Friendly fire is never friendly. And on a 4 to 6, you hit a bad guy. That's risky. So that's a bold move, Cotton, to do that. We then have our modifier tables. So for intervening terrain, it is a +1 modifier. I'm assuming that modifier goes to the defender. So all of the modifiers are an adjustment of the target's speed roll. They get +1 up to 3 times for intervening terrain, +2 for light cover, +4 for hard cover, -1 if it was a quick shot and the attacker moved previously during their activation. And if they are a large target, they get -2. That covers the bulk of the basic rules. And as you can see, if you're familiar with Joe's games, we can see a lot of that influence, but we can also see those derivations where he's gone in a different direction and changed something more to his liking or the way that he thinks is better. And I like that because it's familiar while still being something new. And I'm a fan of that because it keeps me a little bit in my comfort zone, but while also pushing out into new territory. Next up, Divine Favor. So starting at Renown level 1, and for every level thereafter, you gain a Divine Favor. Divine Favors can be used one of two ways. Either to petition your god for a boon, which is basically this game's version of magic. It's something that you ask your god to do for you, and then they help you out on the field. The other is to adjust dice rolls up or down by 1 for each Divine Favor point that you spend, which I feel like that's not something that's really going to be worthwhile until later into a campaign. In the beginning, I feel like you're better off burning your points for boons. Boons cost 1 divine point to call down. They use an action. You may only use 1 boon per turn, and you may not use a boon while you are in combat. To resist a boon, the target would, or whoever the target is, would make a test, as described in the particular boon's notes, adding the number of divine favor points spent on the boon to the total that they need to beat. On a success, nothing happens and you're fine. On a failure, the boon will activate as normal. Speaking of tests, there are 2 types: direct and opposed. A direct test is always rolled against a 14, so it's your 3d6 plus applicable modifiers trying to beat a 14. Opposed tests, on the other hand, are always rolled against the opposing hero's resolve plus any other applicable bonus, or 10 plus the opposing hero's resolve and any other bonuses or modifiers. Now on to some of the fun part, the boons that you can chart. There are 3 boons for each of the major gods that you can follow: Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, the big 3 brothers. Zeus has Shapeshift. We all know why he did that. The Bolt of Vengeance and the Storm of Eagles. Poseidon has Earthquake, Swallowed by the Earth, and Tsunami. Hades has Rejected by the Underworld, Guard of the Dead, and Wither. Not going to go too deep into what each of them do. Just going to read the cool names that they have. We then come to a section on loot tokens. How to collect them, what you do with them, and what happens to you when you got them. So it's an action to pick them up if you're within an inch. Once you pick it up, it moves with you. You may only carry 1 at a time, and when you carry it, you count as encumbered. So your movement speed is halved, and your combat and speed stats are at -1. If you get tired of carrying the heavy thing, you can use an action to set it down. If you get murked while carrying it, it remains where you died. If you move off the table with it, it counts as secured, but of course the model cannot come back. The treasure doesn't have a particular use during the game. It is used in the post-game to see what you get and how you deal with it. We then come to our AI, which is a very simple 3-step process. Very, very similar to the inspiration. So step 1 is starting with the major monster first, and then if you're playing with someone, alternating who activates the minor monsters, but always with the major first. Is it in combat? If it is, it'll swing with its first action, and then swing again with its second action if it wins. If it doesn't win, or if it's pushed back, or if the opponent is back, then it will use its second action. Can't say that phrase. Jeez Louise. To move back into combat. If there's a model, if it's not in combat, and there's a model within 12 inches in line of sight, it will move towards it. If that brings it into combat range, it will use its second action to fight. Otherwise, it will move a second time. If neither of those things are applicable, it will move in a random direction. He gives you a chart to establish that random direction, where each face number of the dice goes with a direction. But as with anything, random directions, as long as you have a way that is properly random to generate the direction, you can do it whatever way you are comfortable with. There are 4 main ways that the game can be won or come to an end, and that is 8 turns have elapsed, the quest's objective is completed, the major monster has been killed where applicable to the scenario, or in the event that neither player has any models left on the board. Once the game is ended, if you're playing the game as a campaign, which I, as well as the author, more importantly the author, strongly suggest you play this in a series of linked games, because that's where you're going to get to see the most fun and the growth of your dudes and the growth of your legend as people, you stroll into towns and people just know who you are. So in the process of doing that and building that legend, unfortunately, we are going to lose some friends on the way. It's sad, but it is what it is. It is the cost of greatness. So whenever your models become incapacitated in a game, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are just gone forever. If it's a minion at the end of the game, you roll a d6. On a 1, they're dead. Any loot and goodies that they had are lost. On a 2, they're alive, but they're hurt pretty bad, and they'll have to sit out the next game. Anything other than that, and they are good and great and ready to go. Now, your majors and minors can accumulate injuries and setbacks and things like that. So their status check is slightly more complicated. You roll on an injury table, which is again just your D6, and then see what you get. So there on a 1, you have a full recovery. On a 2, you are disabled. On a 3, you are grievously wounded. On a 4, you are left for dead. On a 5, it 'tis but a scratch. And on a 6, you make a full recovery. Now there is something here that I love so much that I have a hard time expressing it and staying calm. If your major hero dies, or if one of your heroes dies, you can choose to undertake an Orphan Quest, where you will venture over the river Styx and into the land of the dead, to retrieve them. The story of Orpheus and Eurydice is one of my favorite stories in Greek mythology. Absolutely love it. So I love that that is an option, but I'm pretty sure you can only do it once. But I love that it's there. On a 2, you are disabled, which is a permanent injury that will stick with you. You have to roll on the lasting injuries table, which is on the following page. And it's a 3d6 roll. You can lose toes, shatter a leg, get the shakes, have a lingering weakness, be not quite all there, old wounds, become a mumbler, or it managed to take an eye out. And then each of those comes with corresponding modifiers and penalties associated with them. If you are grievously wounded, then you have a choice. You can either play the next mission without that hero, or you can pay 200 drachma for your major hero, or 50% of the recruitment cost for the minor heroes, with a 50 drachma discount if you have a surgeon's headquarters, a surgeon in your party headquarters, or in the adventuring party. They can heal it and you can go on about your business. If you don't have the money, you can choose to go into debt to pay it, but you can't spend gold on anything else until you pay back that debt to the surgeon. That's a kind of a neat little choice that it presents, especially the going into debt part. I kind of like that a lot. On a 4, you're left for dead, which means you were so grievously wounded and injured that the rest of the party thought you were dead and left you there. But you weren't. Unfortunately, you were too weak to defend yourself when the vagabonds came to strip the armor and weapons from your body on the battlefield. When you come to, naked as the day you were born, you do manage to crawl, limp, and trudge your way back to camp. And because of what you have overcome, you are allowed to gain +1 in your choice of combat, resolve, or health. On a 5, it 'tis but a scratch, but it's a pretty deep scratch. You don't get any major penalties, but you do lose all the items that you were carrying. That seems harsh, but I'm here for it. And then on a 6 is a full recovery. You're just ready to go for the next mission. Then we come into we have the optional quest, the rules for handling the Orphean journey and the things that you will encounter there. And then we have Renown is the next step in the postgame. So Renown is earned by gaining XP. And Renown is graduated. So level 1 is 100 XP. Level 2 is 200, 300 is 300, etc., etc. To gain XP, you do the following things. You get 10 XP for each boon that your major hero successfully calls. You get 40 for each enemy minion taken out, 60 for each minor monster, 80 for each minor hero, 160 for each major hero, and 200 for each major monster. Along the way, you will get some perks. At level 1, you get Divine Favor. Level 2, you get Here to Stay, so you've adventured long enough to for it to become their permanent profession, and you can outfit a camp from which to impart on your quests. At 6, you get Wheat from Chaff. You've done it long enough to tell experienced adventurers from total noobs. All minor heroes and minions hired by the party start with +1 combat speed and resolve, in addition to any other bonuses that they may have. At level 8, you get In the Company of Heroes. Your more experienced heroes have decided to join the party, and for a cost, of course, you can hire a single hero of legend for the cost indicated. And then at 12, you obtain a godly reward. Your major hero becomes a minor god on Olympus. They are immediately transported to a higher plane of existence and no longer bother with the affairs of mortals. They achieve apotheosis and then leave the rest behind. That's pretty sweet. So I guess that's the ultimate end goal. We then come into a part that I have no idea if this is completely of Christian's invention or if this is a modification from maybe Frostgrave, because I haven't played that game. But I love this. There are like built-in achievements that you can track on the character sheet and keep up. There's monster slayers, looters, survivors, heroic resolves. And each, or most of them, have several tiers of things that you can achieve and then a bonus that you get when you do it. Love that. Love that so much, because in my head I hear, ding, achievement unlocked. So Renown is earned by gaining XP. And Renown is graduated. So level 1 is 100 XP. Level 2 is 200, 300 is 300, etc., etc. To gain XP, you do the following things. You get 10 XP for each boon that your major hero successfully calls. You get 40 for each enemy minion taken out, 60 for each minor monster, 80 for each minor hero, 160 for each major hero, and 200 for each major monster. Along the way, you will get some perks. At level 1, you get Divine Favor. Level 2, you get Here to Stay, so you've adventured long enough to for it to become their permanent profession, and you can outfit a camp from which to impart on your quests. At 6, you get Wheat from Chaff. You've done it long enough to tell experienced adventurers from total noobs. All minor heroes and minions hired by the party start with +1 combat speed and resolve, in addition to any other bonuses that they may have. At level 8, you get In the Company of Heroes. Your more experienced heroes have decided to join the party, and for a cost, of course, you can hire a single hero of legend for the cost indicated. And then at 12, you obtain a godly reward. Your major hero becomes a minor god on Olympus. They are immediately transported to a higher plane of existence and no longer bother with the affairs of mortals. They achieve apotheosis and then leave the rest behind. That's pretty sweet. So I guess that's the ultimate end goal. We then come into a part that I have no idea if this is completely of Christian's invention or if this is a modification from maybe Frostgrave, because I haven't played that game. But I love this. There are like built-in achievements that you can track on the character sheet and keep up. There's monster slayers, looters, survivors, heroic resolves. And each, or most of them, have several tiers of things that you can achieve and then a bonus that you get when you do it. Love that. Love that so much, because in my head I hear, ding, achievement unlocked. Once you've tracked and sorted out all that stuff, it's time to count up your loot. So for each loot token that you made it off the board with, you get 1 roll on the loot table. It is a 3d6 roll, so from a 3 to 18, it ranges at bottom of the table to d6 times 20 drachma. To the top of the table, at 18, 400 drachma. And then you have some legendary items, bronze weapons, armors, magical items, scrolls, potions, but all of them have at least some amount of drachma, which is the currency, attached. Speaking of potions, so when you roll on the loot table, if you get potions, there will be a bracketed number that tells you how many of them you find. You roll that many times on the potion chart. There are 6 potions. They can be used once, and you cannot use them while in combat. However, there's no roll or anything like that. Their effects are immediate and automatically successful. Scrolls work the exact same way, except there are more of them. There's a 3d6 roll, so there'd be 15 or 16 different scrolls that you can get. They take up an item slot the same as potions in your inventory. They can be sold or stashed. There is no roll to use them. You just read off the directions and the spell is cast automatically and immediately. If you find a magic item, it's a d6 roll. You could get an amphora of healing, an amulet of Apollo, a chiton of arrow turning, a talisman of fate, a pithos of the 4 winds, or a girdle of strength. And then each comes with their modifiers and things that they do. Celestial bronze weapons and armor, again, d6 roll. It could be any of the regular weapons, it seems, but in bronze. So dagger, sword, spear, axe, shield, armor in celestial bronze. And then our legendary items, which are again a d6, and it looks like maybe these stretch a little bit beyond the standard main 3 patron gods, which your minions and stuff can be patrons of lesser deities. There's Poseidon's Pearl, which is a consumable, but it gives you an immediate teleport. Aegis, Maya's Sandals, Enuklusmos, Harmonia's Necklace, and the Helm of Darkness. Once you sorted out your loot situation, kept what you're going to keep, sold what you're going to sell, you can spend it. You can spend it to hire new minions, hire new minor heroes, purchase new equipment, hire heroes of legend if you're at that point, or establish a camp / renovate your camp. You can also purchase equipment. It gives you a chart with all of the equipment and how much it costs, as well as what it does. So a good quick reference for all the weapons and equipment in the game. It then gives you the cost for the different heroes of legend that you can recruit, who are Achilles, Atalanta, Heracles, Jason, Odysseus, Perseus, and Theseus. And it gives you their stat lines and all of their starting equipment. They are very pricey. We then come to the section on establishing a camp. And I love games that have things like this, whether it be very simple and straightforward or whether it be very complex. I like it when there's a base and I get to like add things to it and manage it and get bonuses from it. I like that a whole bunch. So once you've reached the point in Renown that you are here to stay, you get to choose one of these base types. That can be a temple, a treasury, a brewery, a library, a crypt, or an armory. Each comes with their own various bonuses. Over time, you are allowed to make renovations. There are 4 different ones. Each of them can be done once for their drachma costs, which start at 250 and the highest one is 350 drachma. They are carrier pigeons, a smithy, a surgeon's quarters, or a potion maker's stall. Not going to go through what all they do, but each of them comes with their bonuses to different things. And last section in the book are the quests. There are 5 total quests, or 6 quests in the game, and there's at least one other supplement that has been made that Christian also sent me. But in the book, we have the Minotaur's Maze, the Garden of Statues, the Island of the Cyclops, the Boar Hunt, the Colchian Fleece, and the Centauromachi. So obviously we're fighting the Minotaur, the Medusa, the Cyclops, what was it? Amaranthian? I don't remember where the boar was from, but the boar is from the Trials of Hercules. The fleece is from Jason's story. And then we have the, I think, centaurs. We then have an appendix for spells and an appendix for bestiary. So it gives us the stat lines for the different monsters, our stat lines for minor monsters, stat lines for summon minions, and then we have an optional kind of repeatable quest, which is a monster hunt, where you're going to randomly generate something. And then we've got our character sheets in the back, which are also available online, which is easier. I like it. It's good that the sheets are in the book, but the sheet in the book never does us any good. We need that thing that we can print out, because photocopying something that's in a book, unless it's spiral bound, never works out well. And that does it for the book. So there's not a whole lot of art in the book for Final Thoughts. Some of it at the beginning is this type of just standard digital painting, which is nice. There's, however, more that is kind of a reddish brown, like this type of art, which I love this kind of etched looking type of art. It's one of my favorite things in the world. The PDF for this book is on Wargame Vault. It is $15. Absolutely reasonable. Wargame Vault does not have a print option for this, so I'm not entirely sure where to go to get the printed version, but if I find out, I will put a link down in the description. In the meantime, I will put the link to Wargame Vault down there for you as well. I think this is going to be a lot of fun, especially as a fan of Joe McCullough's games, like Christian is. This gives me kind of a fan-made extension. I'm mostly familiar with the rule set, but there are some minor things that are different, but they're not so many of them that I think it will throw me off in any way. I love the order the book is written in. It makes a lot of sense, the progression of the chapters. Sometimes in some books things get wonky and are put in orders that are strange to me, but I like the layout of the book very much. I like that the printed size is this smaller format, not some big giant honking thing for me to carry around. All that to say that for $15, if you have ancient models already and you're just interested in something else fun to do with them, or if you are a fan of Joe's games and the way that they play, but you're looking for something different, or you've played all the enormous amount of content that he's created for his games, and you're looking for something different that's not going to be a huge pain in your brain to learn new rules, this could be a great step. If you're new to wargaming, I think this game is very, very friendly towards you as a new wargamer. I think it would be very, very easy to pick this up with you and some of your buddies. You could very easily split a Greek starter army from Victrix or Wargames Atlantic or any number of a plethora of other companies and manufacturers, and have every option that you need to play this game, and then a ton of models left over. And you're going to be into that maybe $40 to $60, I would say, to split a starter army for an Ancient Greek in 28mm. There's also the option, if you wanted to play it in 15mm or something smaller, do it, switch all the inches for centimeters, and go to town. I've seen that work a lot in these kinds of games, scaling it down to 15mm, and it seems to work really, 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 really well. So don't feel like you have to be stuck to the native 28mm. I think this game is worth it. I think this game is going to be a lot of fun. I'm pretty excited to get everything together for it. I've got the models together. I've just got to get them painted, and that's a whole nother personal problem for me to deal with. For now, thank you so much for tuning in, hanging out, letting me talk at you about demigods. I hope you have an absolutely amazing rest of your day.